It's just after noon Central Time, which means it's my privilege to welcome you to today's Alumni Career Webinar, Utilizing the Business Model Canvas to Create Sustainable Value, presented by Alvin McBorrough. My name is Maggie Elmarafi, and I'm the Assistant Director for Career Programs here at the Alumni Association. Our office is committed to helping provide alumni with the resources they need to stay competitive in an ever-changing job market and support the alumni community with career resources, networking channels, and job search capabilities. It's my privilege to introduce you to our presenter today, Alvin McBorrough. Alvin is a 2012 graduate of the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and the managing partner and co-founder of OGX Consulting. He is responsible for defining and implementing the firm's strategic goals and objectives. He provides leadership and direction towards broadening the firm's offerings, business development, quality assurance, and risk management initiatives. Alvin also drives employee recruitment and development programs, sustains high performance standards, develops and oversees corporate policies, as well as the firm's financial control mechanisms. Previously, Alvin held several management positions at Cisco, Level 3 Communications, Touchpoints Consulting, Comcast, AT&T, the Government of Liberia, and British Telecom. Currently, Alvin is also an adjunct professor teaching strategy and entrepreneurship at Daniels College of Business at the University of Denver. Today's webinar will focus on the Business Model Canvas, a practical strategic management tool that helps companies build better business models and helps individuals find the right jobs in today's economy. Now, let's get to the reason that you've all joined today, and let me welcome Alvin.
Okay, thank you very much, Maggie. Greatly appreciate it, and welcome to all of you. And now we can get started. So to jump right in, I would like to start off by saying that there are two warnings I would like to lay out up front before we just run into this presentation here. The first is that we have about 65 slides that we have to go through within 45 minutes. The next is that we will definitely want to be able to see how best we can elevate your thinking from what we call legacy thinking to transformational thinking. Why transformational thinking? Let me start with a story. It is 2010 in December, and I'm at Denver International Airport just about to board a flight on to San Jose, California. I'm attending a leadership workshop at Cisco, a leadership planning meeting at Cisco at the headquarters in San Jose. Unfortunately, as many of you who have passed through Colorado, you might be well aware that we have most times snowstorms, and that can delay flights. So I had one of those episodes where my flight was delayed leaving Denver into San Jose. So one of the things that I like to do is that I wander into a bookstore and I pick up this book. As I walk in, there is a book that is that is on the shelf. It is oddly sticking out. And this book is extremely unique. So I pick it up and I start reading through, and all of a sudden I really get captivated because it is intriguing. I'm supposed to be attending a workshop, or I'm attending a program where we're supposed to be discussing the business model for how Cisco Services will be able to grow to a $10 billion entity within Cisco within a couple of years. So it is intriguing that I pick up this book, and I can tell you that this book was one of the most transformational books that I've ever read. And for a couple of reasons. The first thing is that the concepts that I learned from this book, or I was able to gather from this book, became readily applicable to the things that we're doing at Cisco immediately. The second thing is that as an entrepreneur who's heavily involved in the startup community here in Denver as a mentor and investor, this book, the concept from this particular book, has become one of the key principles that we use today to be able to create value for our stakeholders, deliver value to them, and at the same time, also capture significant value in the marketplace. The third element is that in my role as a management consultant and also a leadership coach, this is a concept that we've significantly leveraged to be able to help companies think about how they're going to provide value, how they're going to create value, how will they deliver it to their stakeholders as well. And in addition to that, I also find myself in a position, as Maggie rightly indicated, that I teach at the University of Denver at the Daniels College of Business, where we're able to work with very young students, and these are usually freshmen, first-year students, second-year students. And within 7 weeks, by using the same principle from this particular book, most of these students are able to go out, not only define business models, not only go out and start their own businesses, but most of them are able to start pitching investors within 7 weeks. So the concept that we're about to walk you through today, these are real concepts that work, and I believe that most of you will find significant value in this. All right. So moving forward, today's reality. There are a couple of things, I think, based on the background and the stats that we gather from those on the call today. There are two sets of people that would like to talk to. The first group would be folks that are considering entrepreneurship as the possible next step in their career, or what we'll call game changers, folks that are still within their current position but looking to see how best they can change the layout and how they're currently playing today. So the first group that we'd like to talk to is that typically as an entrepreneur, one of the key things that you're told is that we need to build a business plan. But as you can see from what Steve Blank said over here, that no business plan survives the first contact with a customer. And it is true. In my opinion, we like to say that business plan is dead because for the most part, you write these huge business plans and nobody will sit down to read it, right? So one of the key things that we like to focus on is that that particular model is not working. The second is that for most of you who might be considering a game-changing step where you will be looking at new opportunities, where you find yourself for the most part is that you're in the sea of many other applicants that have a sign that says hire me. How can you distinguish yourself from the rest of the pack? I believe that by looking at some of the content from the business model will be a significant way for you to do it. And in conclusion, we'd like to say that the two concepts that we just talked about, the way of writing a business plan and using the current approach to look for jobs, they're 100% wrong. So one of the key things that we'd like to definitely touch upon is the fact that we know that the traditional approach is not working. So one of the things that we need to do to be a little bit more distinctive is that we need to be able to think differently and we need to also act differently as we continue to move down this particular path, right? And in addition to that, one of the key things that we like to say is that there is no good in just being better. You have to be different in the way you want to be able to approach the way you handle your business today or the way you perceive the business and how you will be able to deliver value to the marketplace. In addition to that, there is another key component that we believe that you also need to be able to consider. You need to start looking at new tools. And for instance, this is what we'll be going through. This is a simple tool that we definitely leverage. It's very simple, but yet powerful in my opinion, right? It's called the Business Model Canvas. We will be looking at that today. In addition to that, we also want you to start thinking about new approaches. Well, I believe most of us on the call today are all familiar with Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, software, a little bit of application development, podcasting, and blogging. But how can I really leverage this today as a means to be able to enhance my business model? For us to be able to go out there today to deliver significant value. How can we leverage these tools? And there are certain things that we would definitely want you to be able to consider. The third, but not the least, is the fact that we need to have some new skills as we continue to address and how we want to be able to move forward in the 21st century and how we believe that we want to be able to create, deliver, and also capture value in the marketplace. So some of the key concepts that we have here is the fact that we need to be a little bit more collaborative. We need to be able to effectively communicate with our stakeholders, our value proposition. We need to be able to think like entrepreneurs, right? And the next one is that we are problem solvers. We're here to solve problems. Irrespective of whether you're a business owner, you want to be an entrepreneur, or you are looking at the possibility of even going back to what we would call a game changer within the industry. There are all of these concepts that we need to be able to apply. Before we do that, I would like to tell you a little bit about my journey. As you can tell, I have a very unique accent. So I was born in Liberia, what we like to call sweet Liberia. That's where I'm from. And over the past few years, I'm sure most of you may have heard about many things happening in Liberia. Quite recently, we were enrolled with the whole episode of Ebola and all of that. But thank goodness now people back home are doing a whole lot better. Here is my family over here. That's my mom, my dad, and my wife, and my many children that I have over here. Really excited. So let's talk about my career a little bit. As Maggie indicated, I started my career working for British Telecom back in Africa. I was part of the team back in the 90s, and I'm sure it sounds like many, many years ago for some of you, but back in the 90s with the revolution of mobility in Africa, or wireless mobility, it became one of the things that we got involved with. I was part of the team that helped launch some of the key mobile initiatives across West Africa. After I finished that particular job, I moved on and I worked for the government of Liberia. At 26, I was one of the youngest ministers of state serving in my country's government. So, which was a privilege because we're involved. We had just come out of a bloody civil war. We were considering how will we rebuild our entire public infrastructure. So I was involved. I did a lot of presentations overseas, locally, trying to see how best we could find international partnerships to work with our own people to be able to help us develop some of our key economic infrastructures. I moved to the States in 1999. Started working for a company called AT&T Broadband. AT&T Broadband is no longer around. It got acquired by Comcast. in 2002. In 2002, when Comcast acquired AT&T Broadband, at the time I was working on a product which was the first voice over IP product for AT&T Broadband, which today most of you may know as Comcast Digital Voice. It was a product that I heavily supported as the project manager. We deployed that here in Boulder, Colorado, and it went very, very well and was extremely successful. After I left Comcast, I joined a startup company called Touchpoints Consulting. Worked there for a year. On my second engagement, which was with Level 3 Communications, my contract got brought over. I joined Level 3 working in corporate strategy and corporate development, and I started leading an initiative within Level 3 called the Global Operational Excellence Program for Level 3. Did that for about 2 years. In 2006, an opportunity came knocking, and that was Cisco. So I left and I joined Cisco in 2006. I spent about 5 years at Cisco, where I was responsible for driving work in advanced services and Cisco advisory services, primarily Cisco services, deploying solutions and services for Cisco to many of the clients that we supported in the emerging markets, and most of them were in the States as well. In 2011, finishing up my MBA at the University of Chicago, an opportunity came knocking again where it was time to look at a new opportunity. So I jumped on board and we started a company called OGX Consulting, and that is what I'm part of here today. So with OGX, we are currently based out of Denver. We do work in different sectors now, and we're looking at opening up our second office in LA in the next few months. We will be looking at the possibility of expanding there as well. Just to give you a quick overview of some of the clients that we support, there's a short list of some of the clients that we currently have and others that we've supported in the past as well. All right? So enough about me, and now let's talk about why we're here. So why is it that we need a new business model? I believe that some of you might be asking this question on the call today. Yes, we all do need a new business model. The business model, in my opinion, is one of the most critical components. As you can see from this statement from Professor Tees from Cal Berkeley, is that when we get the business model wrong, there's oftentimes that we have little chance of no success. So having a critical business model, or defining your business model and saying that this is what we're going to do in the marketplace, this is what we're going to stand for, and this is how we're going to change the game in the marketplace, is very critical. The business model is a flexible concept, as you will see. It can be applied to your individual career enhancements. It can also be applied to you as an entrepreneur. Why is this important today? One of the key things that we're seeing is that this has become widely embraced by many across many sectors. As an entrepreneur, one of the key questions that we often ask ourselves is that how can we enter this particular market, for instance? We have a new technology. How can we commercialize on this particular technology? How do we create blue ocean opportunities, right? How do we create uncontested markets where we can certainly get in and we can dominate that particular space? For some of you on the call today, you might be business executives. You're confronted with the problem of how do I currently where we are today? What is our growth strategies, or what are our growth strategies? The next one is that how can we also create competitive advantage in where we are currently competing? And in addition to that, how can you defend your market share today? So these are things that will allow you to be able to sit down and think about, and these are areas that business model is being used. Some of the work that we do as a management consulting firm, we work in the public sector, we work with public officials. And some of the key things that we're using today to be able to transform and bring significant and sustainable value is by leveraging the business model, or what we'll call the business model canvas, as we'll go through that and you'll be able to see that. So you're asking a simple question: how can we enhance value for our stakeholders, our citizens, right? How can we effectively manage our public funds that have been entrusted to us by taxpayers? The other one is that you're looking at innovative approaches. How can we in the public sector now begin to use advanced analytics, predictive analytics, for instance, as a means to be able to drive significant value, right? So there are multiple ways the business model has been widely embraced today. And believe it or not, even my cousins in Africa are even embracing the business model concept, right? I mean, one of the key things we like to say is that a business model in the hands of a Zulu warrior, it equals to strategic innovation. I mean, for all you may know, the next time my friend over here who's sitting in his little hut, the next thing you will know, he will build a story building, right? Because he has some new concept now about how he can embrace business model, right? So I believe for most of you on the call today, you might be asking yourself or asking, what is a business model, right? A business model, for the most part, as I like to say, the author of this particular book, his name is Alexander Osterwalder. He defines business model in the simple terms around how we're able to create, deliver, and capture value as an organization for the most part. So if you begin to ask yourself the simple questions there as well, today you find yourself in your current position. How are you creating value? How are you delivering value? And what are you capturing that is considered to be value in the marketplace today? So when you look at the essence of the business model, seeks to address three simple questions. The first one is that who are we going to deliver value to, or who are our customers? What are we going to offer to our customers, and how are we going to do it? The first one is that you need to be able to understand the market that you're going to operate in, the segment, the individual customers. What are the solutions that you're going to bring to market? Do you have an effective product? Do you have an effective solution as well? The next one is that do you have an experience that your customers, for you if you're a job seeker, or what we will call a game changer. If you want to change the game within your industry, for instance, what are the things that you're going to do that is going to be extremely unique? That whoever your potential employer will say that there is somebody out there that I definitely need to be able to come and join my team. The final piece is about how are we going to offer that? How are we going to create the value? How are we going to deliver that value? And how are we going to capture that? And this is built pretty much on what we call our value proposition. All right? And the best way for us to be able to express what we call our business model is what we definitely leverage, or what we often use is what we call a business model canvas. And I believe that most of you, I think we got a well-represented number of you that went to University of Chicago or to boot the business school, and I believe that you may have come across this particular concept. And there may be others that this might be relatively brand new. So one of the key things that we've done over here today is that we know some of you have tremendous experience working with the business model canvas, and there may be others that may not have really used it before. So our intent today is that we haven't really elevated this to the highest level where it will be extremely complicated, but we've made it in a way where you will be able to understand if you haven't used it before. And as you will tell, it's fairly simple, okay? So let's go through what we believe the business model consists of. The business model consists of 9 building blocks. The first building block that we often like to consider is what we call the customer segment, right? This is critical. If I need to be able to go out and provide a particular good or service or a product, or even let's assume that I'm supposed to be looking for a new opportunity, who do I believe will be the right customer for my service or for my good or my product that I believe that I want to bring to the marketplace? And that's the first question you need to ask yourself. And once you can define that customer segment that you want to go after, there are other people that will call it a target market, right? We want to be able to define the right level of customers that will be able to benefit from what we'll call our value proposition. Now, our value proposition in simple terms is what we're going to offer to the marketplace. Why is my product or my service going to be extremely unique versus whatever somebody else want to be able to offer? Why is your experience extremely unique from the standpoint of the fact that you went to University of Chicago? You have a unique brand. Why do you think you need to be the most outstanding candidate for a particular job? Or in addition to that, why do you believe that with the current business plans that you have with your current business model, do you believe that the offering that you have is relevant for today's society? In order for you to get your offering to your customer, as you can tell, we have a delta. So we need a channel. The channel, for the most part, is how you're going to transfer your offering that you currently have and get that to your current customer that will be able to use this particular value that you are creating for them. In addition to that, you also need to be able to build an effective relationship with your customer. The question to you will be, what kind of relationship are you hoping to have with your customers? What kind of relationship you believe, because at the end of the day, you're only in business, your relevance in business is based upon what your customers demand or what their market needs might be. So if you do not have an effective relationship with your customers, you will miss out on that particular component. Let's assume that I'm also a game changer. I need to understand what the market is looking for today. If I'm able to go out and effectively provide that particular good, service, or product, or bring my experience to the table, I believe that it will significantly enhance the well-being of all of us in this particular community. All right? Moving on, with the next thing is around the revenue streams that we want to be able to consider. By offering this particular value to the customer, having the channel and an effective relationship, how much am I going to really charge for the services that I really want to be able to provide to my market segment, or to this particular addressable market? And that's a big question. So you need to be able to figure out how much will you be able to make, how much are they willing to pay. You need to be able to understand the willingness of the customer to pay. And I believe that's a big concept that we discuss in business school for the most part, for most of you who are business students, but notwithstanding, even if you're still an entrepreneur, you need to figure out how you're going to be able to charge for your goods and your services. What kind of pricing model are you going to use? Is it going to be transactional? Is it going to be subscription? Is it going to be on-time, on-demand services, or whatever you might decide that revenue stream might look like? All right? So moving on, the next thing would be around your key resources. What are the key resources you need to be able to help you deliver and create the value that you want to be able to deliver to the marketplace? You have a unique offering. How are you going to deliver that to your customer? Do you have the right resources that will be able to help you to do that? In addition to that, you need to discuss the key activities that you will be able to provide to the marketplace, right? And the key activities, what are the things that we need to do consistently to ensure that we're delivering our value proposition? And that's the question you need to ask. The things that I'm doing today, is this going to add to what we're supposed to be doing? Is this relevant? If I'm going to be in the software development space, do we have people that are actually, our primary focus is on developing high quality software that we can now provide to our clients in the marketplace, right? Then the next one will also be around what we call our key partners. So there are multiple things that will help us get to the next level. One of those key elements would be having the right set of partners that we need to be able to work with effectively. So as an entrepreneur, I believe that you can't do all things. You need to define your partner network. Even as one who's looking for employment opportunities, you need to be able to figure out that I need to partner with people. For instance, I need to partner with recruiters. I need to partner with the University of Chicago Alumni Association, for instance, in my local community, because that would be a good place where I will expand my network and get to meet different people. And there are examples that we'll go through, one for an entrepreneur, the next will also be for someone who's also looking at a game changer, one who's looking to enhance their career opportunities. The final, the last but not the least, is what we call our cost structure. The only way I can stay profitable, how much is it going to cost me to be able to create the value that I want to be able to bring to the marketplace? How much is it going to cost me from a cost perspective for us to be able to deliver the things that we want to be able to bring forward? And based on that, ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, this is what your business model canvas will look like. Primarily, it consists of these 9 building blocks, and that's what we'll be able to utilize. And there are 3 things that we talked about based on the definition of our business model. Primarily, it's around how we create value, how we deliver value, and how we capture the value. So primarily, this is what our business model will consist of. And going through this particular piece, there are a couple of examples that I would definitely want to be able to walk you through. I want to make sure that we have ample time for questions and answers. So let us take, for instance, there's some real examples that we've quite recently come across. And these are things that are quite relevant, I believe, to our discussion here today. And hopefully you guys, it will resonate with you as well. So given the demographics of the people that we have on the call today, I believe that we wanted to talk to 2 principal stakeholders here today. The first will be maybe our entrepreneurs, people that have that bug that want to go out and start something. The second one would be more like our friend Matt or my cousin Matt on the right-hand side, who's a job seeker or what we'll call a game changer. And by the way, this is Adekunle. Adekunle, it's not his picture that is on the magazine, but I just thought that this was a nice one that we wanted to put up here. But primarily, let us just take, for instance, so I will give you this real example that came across. So last December, one of my business partners called me up and said, hey, Alvin, I just ran into this young man. He's from Africa, one of your cousins, so talk to him. He has a very, very promising business idea, and I believe that it will be something that will resonate well with you. It's around information security. One of the key pieces that we do in our firm is the fact that we spend some time, we spend a large portion, we have 3 practices. We have a strategy practice, we have an operations practice, or what we call operational excellence. We also have a technology arm where we provide advisory services to CIOs, and we also have what we call our managed analytics practice. So data is a big piece. So when he mentioned the data piece, he said, well, take a look at this guy. I think this guy is promising. He's a bright guy. He's worked in this space before. He got some good, he speaks a good game. Let's talk to him. And primarily, there was this gentleman who had, it was information security around encryptions. So one of the key things when we met with him in a typical fashion, he showed up and he had a business plan. His business plan was very complex, right? Like most of the time, we have business plans that are over 50 pages. And I don't really have a lot of time to sit down and read through 50-page business plan. So I asked him, I said, well, have you ever worked with a business model canvas before? He said, no, that's foreign to me. So immediately I whipped out a sheet of paper and walked him through it and said, well, this is how it works. It consists of 9 boxes. It's very simple. Let's talk through this. And by the end of the day, this became a unique opportunity that we invested in. And now this gentleman is we didn't only invest in it, but now we're mentoring this entire company and we're providing services to them as well. So primarily, when we whipped this up together, this is what we came up with from the business plan perspective, the business model perspective. The first thing is that he had a secure platform where he was building this entire solution around. It was around encryption, information encryption. The next thing was that his pricing model that he was using to come to market was very affordable. The quality associated with this was also very, very high because the client that had gone through, a couple of his clients that tested it out, and it worked very well. And one of the big things for him he thought was a value proposition was the fact that it was made in the U.S. and everything was developed right here in Boulder. And we told that, look, I mean, this is a value proposition that we need to tell our clients about because the market segment that he was going after was a little bit suspect. As you can see from here, his target market was the government, and he also wanted to go after financial services, where he felt that, I mean, these were the 2 critical components here that he needed to get into. So this was the immediate go-to-market strategy, the early customers that we were going to go after. And I believe that right now there are a whole lot more customers out there that are wanting this particular technology. Now, we discussed the channel. How are we going to reach the customers became the next question. There are 2 ways we could do it. One of them was around what we call the consultative assessment. And primarily, these were just short-term assessment that we will come in and assess a couple of key components within your information security structures. Come up with a report and tell you exactly where there were some major loopholes and vulnerabilities could easily happen and all of that. In addition to that, direct sales became one of the channels that they were going to use, or we were going to use to be able to get to these customers that we had outlined. Another key component was that he understood the whole fact that, I mean, if we're going to build this, we have to build this on the lifetime value of the customer. We have to think long term. So we decided to pursue it. So we needed to build effective relationship, long-term relationship with these customers because for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were going to be the beta customers that were going to use this particular piece. They were going to be the proof of concept as to how this will work. And we had to treat these customers with a lot of care and respect. So that became a very effective relationship. And especially if we wanted to build this for long term or the long haul, we had to go down this particular route. Okay. The next one was the key activities. The key activity was fairly simple. As you can see over here, it was focused on software development. And that was the big piece. These guys developed a software, was a platform as to how they were encrypting all of these messages. So that was the big piece, the major activity that we had to perform. The key resources that were needed, as you can see from here, we needed software developers, we needed sales consultants, and we also needed the back end for people to run operations in the background, right? The key partners that we identified that were going to be very applicable to how we're going to use and leverage this particular piece, the channels that were going to be sold through was going to be through value-added resellers, partners that we identified. Some of them were critical that we easily identified and said, look, these guys already have the extensive relationship into this particular market segment, so it became a no-brainer for us to pursue relationships with them. In addition to that, we also looked at what we call service providers, and these may be your technology providers, Comcast and Verizon, the AT&Ts of the world. Form relationship with them because they were also selling at an enterprise level some of these same solutions, but they didn't really have something that was as robust as we identified. Given the fact that these guys wanted to grow within the U.S. and they wanted to leverage U.S. resources, they had to build relationship because they expected that this market was going to grow. So we had to look at how can we effectively develop a talent pool. And primarily, they decided to build relationship with ComSci departments here locally in the Denver area, where we have some pretty significant good universities that are producing some outstanding computer science programmers out of these institutions. So it became critical for them to be able to think along those lines. The next was around the cost structure. And as we looked at the cost structure, it became quite apparent we're going to have direct and indirect costs that we had to deal with, especially from the labor side. And in addition to that, one of the major things that we identified was going to be around customer service, what we call customer relationship management, and also complaints management. Even though we believe that this program was fairly easy to use, we still expected that there will be people that will have questions about it. So there was effort that was made to make sure that we had that embedded within the cost structure. Another key element around the revenue model primarily was around the software subscription sale. That was how our revenue was going to be generated from here. And also the next revenue stream was around consulting services, which pretty much bolted well for the kind of work that we were doing from our consultant perspective. So primarily, within the matter of minutes, we're able to come up with something very comprehensive around how we can easily formulate this particular business model. So as an entrepreneur, my challenge to you today is the fact that I want you to be able to consider something like this. It is true that you may have a business plan. Take, for instance, on the far left-hand side, this is what a business plan outline will look like compared to utilizing a one-page document that now represents your entire business plan that you can effectively communicate this to any investor or anybody who might be a mentor or someone who might be interested in doing business with you. It's a very effective and powerful way for you to be able to communicate this to all of your key stakeholders. All right. Moving on, the next thing we want to talk about is around the fact that now, here is one, for instance, with another gentleman, one of my fellow University of Chicago alums, where I'm heavily connected to the community here in Denver. And I had a couple of these young folks reach out to me and said, look, I'm trying to change my entire market, market segment where I've worked for the past 5 years. I'm looking to move into something that is extremely unique. And we sat down, and I'm still using the same business model canvas. And I also asked my friend Matt the same question. And I said, Matt, tell me a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish. And he went through what he was trying to do, which market he wanted to work in, and the sector, the industry, and what he saw himself doing within the next 5, within the next 6 years, and all of that. So I said to Matt, I asked him a simple question. I said, Matt, if I'm supposed to hire you, let's assume I'm not into where you want to go right now, but let's assume that I'm supposed to hire you. What is your value proposition? And it was he was a business student, obviously, he went to University of Chicago, so well-versed. So he said to me that, hey, my value proposition to you, Alvin, will be these that I've listed up here. The first one is that I'm dedicated, I'm reliable, I have experience, and I also have a degree from the University of Chicago. And I said, well, it works well because primarily it's not that we are biased, but we understand the rigor that is associated with getting a degree from Chicago. So we oftentimes have a bias to hiring people that went to Chicago to come work for us and all of that. So I said, well, good selling points, my friend. I think this is something that would be excellent. We'd love to have you come on board, right? So, this is what Matt put out there for his value proposition. So I said, next, let's talk about the market segment that you want to go after. And he said, coming from Chicago booth, investment banking is one of those natural areas where I see myself. Private equity, venture capital, I might go work for a consulting firm or something like that. And I said, okay, that's brilliant. So tell me, Matt, how are you going to get to these folks? What channel are you going to use? And he's going through this anyway. So this is real example that I'm giving you here. It's not something that I'm forging up or anything like that, but this is sitting down with Matt and he's putting this together. So Matt said, well, I'm going to leverage my personal network. And I said, that's excellent. Obviously, if you have connections here, and one of the key benefits that you have, I believe most of you are aware of this, but by going to University of Chicago, especially when you're looking at work in finance, you've got an extensive network of folks that work in investment banking, private equity, VC, and consulting. So, it made tremendous sense. Absolutely. That is a channel that you can use to get there versus you trying to be like everybody else that says, hire me, and you're just one in the million of many other applicants that will be out there. And the next one was the fact that we had already, prior to this, we had a conversation around leveraging guerrilla tactics. So what are some of the guerrilla tactics that Matt decided to do? One of the key things that he decided to focus on is the fact that he was thinking about building, he built a model. And he said, this is a model that I believe that a lot of companies will be able to leverage, from a portfolio management perspective, how you can assess, coming up with some other risk factors and all of that to determine how well you will be able to make wise decisions around investments and everything else. So I said to him, well, it is great that you have this particular model, Matt, but what are you going to do with it? He said, well, you know what? I'm considering turning this into an application. And I said, go for it, my friend, because now here you are significantly ahead of the game. If you show up to anybody who's going to hire you, you can show them a working app or a prototype and say, this is something that I believe that I can bring to you. It's instant gratification. All of a sudden, the next thing you realize is that you have what we call an impact relationship immediately. So that is how he believed that he was going to get this to market, right? Now, moving on, the next one that we talked about with Matt is that, so Matt, what are you going to do every day? He said, well, I'm going to develop substance. The substance, for the most part, was part of the product that he was going to work on every day, work towards making sure that he was going out there and telling his story. And in addition to that, one of the key things that he decided to do and focus on was networking. Networking is very big, because I can tell you that, most of the folks that I've hired, have come through my personal network. It hasn't really been through the fact that I got an application, I got a resume online that came through our job portal. It's like, well, I'm not too sure about this. California. I want to take a look at this kid. You might want to hire him because I believe that they bring significant value. So that's how oftentimes I would say over 80% of the folks that we hire usually come through personal networking. So that's another way that we looked at it. Another piece that Matt also talked about was the fact that he was going to leverage big social. And I said, that's brilliant. So one of the big social that he said he was going to leverage was around the fact that he was going to go on LinkedIn, right? And I suggested to him, and I said, look, there is nothing wrong with you writing up, come up with something called the 7 reasons why you should hire a University of Chicago grad, especially in investment banking or private equity. And he wrote an article around that, and it became quite, everybody started reading it, primarily recruiters will go to his page to read it. He had it on social media. It was on Facebook. It was on his LinkedIn page. And one of the other things that he was doing was that he had targeted a particular firm, and he started tweeting every news that came out. He would tweet about it. And all of a sudden, people began to recognize and be like, man, who's this guy who's always getting all of this attention, who's drawing attention to us? And lo and behold, the good news here is that he was able to go out also with his key partners. He built relationship with recruiters. He was able to leverage his University of Chicago network. He was able to become part of the many associations that were around here. He was also able to partner with some thought leaders in the market space, right? From a cost perspective, for the most part, it was just what it cost him to deliver his value. And the rest of it was how much money he wanted to make, in the marketplace, right? It became the next logical step for him. The good news here for Matt was the fact that he was able to land a job, and now he currently works for Goldman, and now that's what he's doing because of some of these things that he was able to leverage. So this became a very practical tool that he was able to leverage to be able to help him advance, and he was able to move up, all right? Unfortunately, I know I can't ask questions right now, but anyway, now, here's some hypothetical questions that I would like to ask you now. I know that we don't have much time left, so I want to be respectful of that. So one of the key things that I wanted to find out from you, do you have a business model today that you're currently working with? If the question is yes, how is it working for you today, right? Have you been able to identify your key customers, for instance? And this could be for any one of us here today. We all have customers at the end of the day. If I'm working for a company, I still have internal and external customers that I need to provide to. As a management consultant, we have the right relationship with our clients. So the question is that, who are your customers? What kind of value are you providing for them today? What is your value proposition? Ask yourself, is my value proposition the one that we currently provide, is it resonating with my current stakeholders, with my clients, for instance? Is it something that they will be able to purchase, right? In a few years, are we going to still be relevant? Or in a few weeks, are we still going to be relevant today? Given the fact that the marketplace is changing constantly, I need to be able to adapt, and I need to be able to change my business model to make sure that we are on the right path and we are delivering the things that we're expected to be able to provide in the marketplace. All right? Now, the next question is that, how are you creating value? How are you delivering this value that you're creating? And how are you capturing value as well from a revenue perspective? Because if I'm delivering value and I create value, I deliver value, I'm supposed to be able to capture some results. That's the reason why we're in business. So if my cost is significantly higher than what I'm charging for it, I need to go back and re-examine it. But if I believe that I'm able to extract significant market value, or what we will call economic rent, I'm in a better position to be able to drive that as well. All right? Okay, so moving on. What did we learn today? I believe that I need to wrap up within about 5 minutes. We want to open it up for questions and answers to be able to take some of those. So what did we learn today? There are a couple of things I believe that we're able to pick up here today. One of the key things that we realized is that the traditional approach to how we approach business and how we approach the way we address our current work, or how we look for employment, or how we look for new opportunities, is not working. So we need to be able to think differently, and we need to be able to act differently. So one of the key things that we impressed upon you is that you need to be able to leverage some of these new tools. And one of the tools, for instance, is the business model canvas that we just walked through. It's a fairly simple tool that you're able to use to create value, deliver value, and capture value, and at the same time, that is able to help you sustain your value in the marketplace. The next one is that we need to be able to look towards using social media as one of the tools that we can easily leverage. One of the key things that you can do with social media, if you're an entrepreneur wanting to start your own venture, how can you publicize this? How can you take, for instance, one of the key things that we're currently working on is around putting together a blog, not a blog, but a podcast, for instance. We have a captive audience that we want to be able to address. So if there is a group that is going to listen to us, and primarily these are customers, these are raving fans, how can we make sure that we're engaging them? How can we make sure that we're providing the value that they're seeking, that we will be able to develop, and the value that we will be able to deliver to them as well? So these are things that we need to be able to ask ourselves on an ongoing basis. Are we delivering the value that the marketplace is looking for? Are we leveraging these new approaches to be able to help us get to some of these extreme markets that we want to get into? Next is that we also want you to be able to start thinking about new skills. What are your skills today? I mean, for some of you, you may think that, well, I don't really know how to program. I don't really know how to do this. But for the most part, you are there to solve problems. And wherever there are problems, I believe that that's a unique opportunity for us to be able to expand and leverage the business model as to how we can effectively embrace the concept around how we are going to drive value and create value in the long run for us and our stakeholders. All right? So one last thing before I wrap up here. I know I got about 3 minutes. One of the things that I would like to just remind you all is the fact that my name is Alvin, and I happen to be one of your fellow alums from the University of Chicago. I mean, this is something that I have leveraged when I was at Booth. I participated in what we call the global GNVC, that was the Global New Venture Challenge. And one of the key pieces that we also leveraged was this business model, because it helps us, it was able to help us define exactly what we wanted to focus on. It is not a long essay that we have to write that we call a business plan. One of the key things that it did for us was that it was also able to help us to challenge the status quo. So that is what I want you to be able to do today. As you consider this particular piece, I want you to also challenge the status quo. Tell yourself that I can definitely be different. I want you to also dare to stand out, because by standing out, you will be outstanding. And that's one of the key things that you definitely want to do in today's marketplace. You want to make sure that whatever you're providing is of significant value. And the way that will happen is that you need to be able to think differently. You cannot really perceive the way you thought about a problem today. You can't think about that tomorrow the same way. You got to come up with what are the relevant things that are out there today. How are we going to make sure that we're having an impact? And the principal reason behind that is that because you deserve it. There is nothing that would subtract away from where you want to go as a business person, where you want to be, and the value that you believe that you can deliver in the marketplace, right? And I believe that if you're able to do that, you will be able to change the current business position by embracing a business model thinking. It's a fairly simple way that you think about the business model. It's a fairly simple way, and the simple things that you're asking yourself: how are we creating value? How are we delivering value? And how are we going to capture value in the marketplace? By doing so, you do that on a one piece of paper. It is significant in the long run to be able to help you. And the reason why I believe that you will be successful as you go down this particular path is that you will become a transformative person, since you will be able to, you will know how to capture value. You will know how to create value, deliver value, and also capture the value that is required for you to be able to drive and stay significant in today's marketplace. All right. And now, in my final word to you is that let us go forth and change the world by building better business models. Because I believe that if we're able to build effective business model, we will be able to solve bigger problems, and we will be relevant. In the process of doing that, we will be able to drive sustainable value for our stakeholders, for our shareholders, and also for ourselves as participants in how we want to be able to build significant business. And at the same time, I would just like to wrap up by saying thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. It's about 11:45, and that was our target, and I think we did pretty good by hitting that. And I would like to turn this over now to questions and answers.
Well, thank you so much, Alvin. We've gotten a few notes of appreciation come through, and I know I speak for many of our attendees when I say thank you again for that presentation. That was really informative and delightful to listen to. So I do have a couple of questions that I'd love to follow up on here with you. I'd like to go back to your example of the entrepreneur using the business model canvas. I know that you recommended using the business model canvas rather than a full-blown business plan. What would you recommend to somebody who is approaching an investor who is requesting or even insisting on seeing a full business plan? Does that just mean that they're perhaps not a good fit for your company or organization, or do you have recommendations outside of that?
Absolutely. It is something that is still required. As you know, that there are folks that are still traditional. They want you to come in with a full-blown business plan. But one of the key things that I often like to tell people is that if you can embrace just by putting all of your business plan on a piece of paper, for the most part, you understand what you're trying to solve for. It becomes very easy for you to be able to do it. So let's take a look at this particular slide, for instance. So here's an outline of what your business plan typically will look like, where you want to go and what you're going to do and all these different things like that. But notwithstanding, you can easily sum up all of the things that we talked about. Your financials can still come from here. And usually what we tell people is that by addressing, so it's the first step in terms of creating a business plan. There are investors that are out there that are married to business plans. They will sit down and read through everything. But in our small network of folks that we work with as investors and mentors, primarily what we're interested in is the fact that anybody who can walk in and explain their business plan on a piece of paper, we believe that that person understands exactly what they're trying to do. And we'll require a little bit more information. Obviously, we're not going to run and say, hey, you got a great business model canvas here. Let's go ahead and start working with you automatically. We're going to put some money into your business. No, it doesn't work like that. There will still be the due diligence. We have to make sure that the economics, the financials will work. And if that is working, then we will be able to go through it. We want to be able to develop roadmaps, milestones. But this is the easiest way for us to get there versus someone showing up and giving me a full business plan that consists of 50-plus pages. And I can promise you I'm not going to read through all of that. But if it's easy for you to be able to reflect and give me something of the high level, then we can dig through the due diligence and go through the numbers later on. But this is where we often want to start. So I'm not opposed to that. And there are some investors that will still want you to be able to have this. But for most of what we're seeing here in our local entrepreneur community that we have here in Denver, Boulder area, I happen to be a part of an accelerator up here in Colorado in Boulder. It's called a Boomtown. And where most of the folks that are up there, this is what we're now beginning to lean mostly towards, because everybody is beginning to understand the importance of having the one page and speaking off of that one page. I'm not too sure how many of you are familiar with the concept, the A3 concept, but from an operational excellence, or what is referred to as the Toyota way, that is one of the key concepts, again, that is often realized. If I can solve problems on a one sheet of paper, it gives me a better appreciation as to how we can easily control and how we can better manage the way that we want to be able to deliver value. So I'm not opposed to that. I believe that some folks will require you to give them a full-blown business plan, which there is nothing wrong with it. But from our perspective, we start off by looking at a business model canvas as where we want to be able to create value.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. We also got another question come in here that I think is very interesting, and I'd like to just read it so that I capture the full essence of the question. So this comes in from a woman who says, I'm in my 60s. Do you think that your model works well for an older entrepreneur who is shifting from being a full-time mother? What would some of the challenges that the model would be particularly useful in overcoming?
Wow. So that's a good question. So I would say that this will work for anybody. One of the key things that we've seen, and I know there are a couple of people out here on the call, we have one of the guys that we're currently working with, and this is more, we're not investing per se, but he's more of one of our mentees. He's a gentleman who retired from the public sector here in Colorado, and he always had this idea about how he wanted to transform certain things within the industry that he came from. So he approached us, came through, and we sat down and met with him, and now he's reinvented himself, and now he's on the way to be able to do it. So depending on what exactly you want to be able to go through, I believe that this would be a very prescriptive way for you to be able to sit down and think about it. The first thing is to ask yourself, what is it that I'm willing to offer to the marketplace? What are customers that are going to buy? How am I going to reach to them, or how am I going to reach out to them? What kind of relationship are we going to have? How am I going to make money? Does it make sense, you know? And this is a broad way for you to brainstorm around this before you launch out and say, well, I want to build a full-blown business plan. But I'm 100% convinced that we've seen it work for other people, and this is irrespective of age. I believe that you will be able to do fantastic with sitting down and using this as a plan. It's a roadmap for how you will be able to model this. And by the time you get done with this, you will be convinced, and you ask yourself, what I will be able to really, what are my ideas are really needed, or what if there is significant value in what we're trying to drive. And by doing so, I believe that it will enhance your ability to create more value and opportunities in the marketplace today.
That's great, thank you. And hopefully that answered the question for our attendee. I am also getting a question in here specific to social entrepreneurship. So the question asks, how does this model change for people interested in social entrepreneurship? I would assume particularly the question might be capturing value. How might the business model canvas adjust our thinking there?
Well, I mean, and I think that's a valid question. I mean, I don't think it will change significantly for social entrepreneurship or whether you just want to be a full for-profit. But oftentimes, I mean, I think this is a very brilliant place because when you think about the fact that you are coming to the marketplace to be able to create value, you want to be able to make sure that you can deliver the value to wherever you're going to. And what is unique about social entrepreneurship is not non-profit or it's not for-profit. We're there not necessarily to be able to generate supernormal profits, but we're there to also generate revenue. So this is a good place for you to test your ideas because you want to be able to think about sustainability. And I think that's one of the key things that we want to be able to drive here. So if you look at it, we have used this same concept working with a group. As I said, you know, we do some work in Africa, but there is a group that we work with right now that is using this same concept where they're using analytics to be able to help farmers in Africa predict weather patterns and all of that. But primarily from a revenue perspective, where they're looking at revenue is not necessarily going back and charging local farmers in Africa. What they're looking at data to be able to predict mortality and all of these different things like that. So what they've done is that in order for them to be able to fund some of these extensive investments, they've partnered with different institutions. So one of the big funders that the group that we work with right now, they're being significantly funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And now there are other people that are out there, for instance, that are partnering with them. One of the key things that we partner with them on is that we're able to bring in some of our data scientists to work with them. And we've also introduced them to the University of Denver, where they're able to leverage some of the students that are looking to do capstone projects. So it's true. You don't really need to say that, hey, you know, we need to charge for the services that we're providing. So if it's supposed to be a social entrepreneurship where there will be a little bit of revenue that will be coming from it, the question is that, is it going to be sustainable enough for you to be able to get there? And if you think about developing these different models where you will be able to generate revenue, one of the key things that these guys are doing is that they're also able to advertise, for instance, in some of these areas that they're currently working on, so they have some level of ad revenue that is coming in to be able to help augment and support some of the key things that they're looking at as well. So I think this is a model that could be leveraged across the board, whether you're for-profit, non-profit, the work that we do in the public sector. Primarily, we're sitting down and having these conversations with people in the public sector. And there is a misconception that in the public sector, we're not here to generate revenue. No, we need to pay for the services that we get in the public sector. So some of these agencies are generating revenues. As you know, through taxes, we generate revenue. Through fees that we charge, we generate revenue. And some of them are going back again to start looking at the services that they provide. If people can come in or if they want to do it online, is there a way for them to be able to charge a minimum fee that will be able to cover some of these technology enhancements? So which, of course, they can redeploy their resources. But there are all of these wonderful thinking that business model can be able to pull out as the way we go through it, the way we brainstorm and we discuss all of these concepts. So in my opinion, I would like to say that, look, this is a very robust tool that you can easily leverage with your social entrepreneurship endeavor, and you will find significant value coming out of this particular piece as well.
Thank you so much, Alvin. That's great. We did have another question come in. Somebody is writing in that she has a micro business and she's ready to grow it. Now, how can she use or modify the business model canvas to grow her already established business? Do you have any recommendations for someone in that position?
Yes. So, and the first thing is that you got to start thinking about it, right? And the first question is that, what are the key things? You know, it goes back to your offering. So wherever you are today, how are you going to offer? How is your offering going to be different? Maybe one of the key things is that, let's assume that if you got a very small business and you're looking on expanding, you want to maybe reach out to a bigger clientele. Now, what is the value proposition that we're going to be able to provide to this particular market space that we want to go after, a market segment? If we can identify, let's assume that we started off by doing a lot of work in the private sector. But we realized that there was a lot of waste in the public sector, and I'm sorry, I don't know whether this will jive with you, but I'm just trying to give you something that will resonate. I'm hoping that it will resonate. But we decided that we wanted to go after work in the public sector because we realized that there were a ton of blue ocean opportunities. And what we mean by blue ocean opportunities, where we could easily leverage our solutions, our ideas, our concepts to be able to bring significant value to those folks that were there because they were not thinking along those lines. So we thought it was going to be transformational. So we sat down and we mapped out the things that we thought was going to be different. We identified the different groups in the public sector that we wanted to go after, and we went after that particular group. And indeed, using the business model canvas was able to help us reflect on the bigger picture and say, well, is this going to be relevant? So the same thing with you. I mean, even though your business may be small, but if you're going to be enhancing or maybe moving up the ladder with a bigger clientele, for instance, or you want to do business on a wider scale or a bigger scale, you can easily begin to start asking the fundamental questions. And for the most part, I would like to say that this is more like a brainstorming tool. It is more like a problem-solving tool that you have to go through and think about it. What are I'm small? What are I'm big? And for the most part, and if your assumptions are 100% in line, or if your assumptions are right, you'll realize that all of a sudden this just fit exactly. One of the key concepts here, for instance, obviously, if you're going to be, your revenue stream will be one of those things that you want to think about. How are you going to generate more revenue, right? If your service that you're providing, if you're selling a product, are you going to increase the price? Are you going to reduce the price because you will sell greater volume? What exactly are you going to be doing to generate revenue? Is it service that you're going to be providing? How much are you willing to charge for your services? Do they go up? Does your service come down because you're now addressing a different market segment? So the way I like to look at this, it's a practical tool. It's a practical template that you can easily leverage to be able to just think through and make sure that your concepts or your assumptions are in line with what you're expecting to generate at the end of the day. And I hope I answered your question. If not, I apologize, but I was hoping that I was able to address that as well.
Well, thank you, Alvin. I certainly think that helped to answer the question, and I appreciate that, you know, we had that little wrap-up summary from you about the business model canvas being a template. I think with that, we'll go ahead and close for the hour since we're just about here on time. And I'd like to say a big thank you once again to you, Alvin. This has been really informative and just a pleasure to listen to. Additionally, thank you everyone on the line for joining us for today's presentation. As a reminder to you all, please do watch your email